Madame Vignola.
Oui.
Mr. Backrack.
Yes.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
Right. So amended. So we're back to the motion as amended. Are we ready to move on that one, colleagues? Seeing no speaking lists, do we need an actual vote on it, or can we consider it? Mr. Sousa?
Yeah. So we appreciate the fact that we're going to go back further. Now, with respect to B and C, there's some discussion amongst
Sure,
us
point of
here.
order. My understanding was you called the vote, and I thought Mr. Sousa was going to comment on whether he wanted a recorded vote or not.
No, I hadn't got to that point. I wish, but we hadn't got to that point.
Let's
Go ahead,
adopt
Mr.
it.
Sousa.
Yeah, well, now we're talking about the amended motion, correct? That is correct. Right. Sir. Okay. So as we go forward, we're having some deliberations as to now how do we proceed in respect to the communications relating to Deloitte's technical specs and the testing of so items B and C. We would like then to remove it. I'd like to put forward a motion to remove B and C.
Just wishing an amendment to remove B and C. Is that correct, Mr. Sousa?
That's correct.
Mr. Kuzmierczak to speak on the amendment.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that obviously I've been saying for quite a long time, which is again needing to just balance the fact that we want to get information in our hands, but balance it with the production of papers to make sure that we're not unduly putting stress on the officials, the staff that are working to develop to bring these documents forward. I fully agree with the contracts being included, but I do support this motion. I think focusing on or generating all correspondence dating back to 2010 may actually slow down this process. So I would support it because I do like the focus on the contracts, and I think that is information that is pertinent. And I think that is information that can be generated actually quite quickly. So just for the purposes of us being more surgical in what we request and more balanced, I would support the amendment that was brought forward by my colleague.
Mr. Generous?
Thank you, Chair. I want to just observe that we're seeing the breathtaking hypocrisy of Liberal members here. Because on the one hand, they say, let's go on a fishing expedition and ask for documents in one part of this motion going all the way back to 2010 when the project didn't even exist. And at the same time, they're saying, well, let's remove from the motion more contemporary requests for documents because, well, it's just too many documents and it takes too much time to get them. How absurd that Liberal members want to add document requests that go far back into history, and at the same time they want to remove document requests on contemporary events because they say, well, it's just too many documents to request. What a hypocritical farce.
Mrs. Vignola, then Mr. Sousa.
Very quickly. I won't get involved in the superlatives that were used. It was far from my intent. I want B and C, but I will tell you why. B deals with all the communications of the CBSA, dealing with any communications with Deloitte, with the technical communications. Why that? Because I wanted to know what the objectives were. As we saw recently with the Auditor General, there were requests elsewhere that were they weren't specific. And if that's the case here, and it brings me back to point C, if we look at the communications relating to CAM's Release 2 testing since October 2023. There will be consequences in terms of tax well beyond the Canadian border. That represents billions of dollars. And we cannot allow for errors like occurred in Phoenix. We cannot allow that again. We want to be able to see the testing results, the test observations, and before it is implemented, before it's put into operation more broadly, that will allow us, if there were problems, if there were results that were perhaps less clear and less successful than we expected, that would allow us to identify them before there is a big problem. Here I'm getting worked up, I know, but that's our role here. Our role is to plan, to see the bumps that will occur in the road ahead. We want to be able to manage properly on the medium term the taxes that will be involved. That's why B and C are so important, and that's why I cannot support the amendment put forward by my esteemed colleague.
Thank you for your point of view, and I appreciate what you're getting to, and we do want to make it relevant in terms of the review. So, to my a further point to the other colleague across the way, if he doesn't believe anything existed prior to 2018, I'm not sure why he's getting us so upset, because the fact is this did come to be around 2010, and since then we have an opportunity now to review in its entirety, even the testing. So, in respect to the ramifications of E and C incorporated within item A, is what we're dealing with, and I gather and I appreciate the sensitivity of ensuring that the program works and initiates what it's intended to do, and that's why we feel that under A it's appropriate. I know my colleague wants to interject even further. Mr. Madgett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've talked about two things. Number one, why dating back to 2010. It is important for us to go that far back because that defines the genesis of the project. What was the requirement, what drove, and what has changed since then? So my understanding is this thing actually dates back to 2007 when there was the strategies being developed. So it is important for us to go that far back, not because we are trying to go cause more work, but is understanding what drove and what has changed since then. So that's number one. Number two, the extent that the B and C are going to by providing all the test documents and all of those things, as someone who's been doing a lot of business transformation enabled by technology and has seen product development and product life cycle, I don't think many of us are qualified to look at test data because or test result, because then you have to qualify an understanding of where the test results are coming, who has developed the test cases, what type of unit testing has been done, where is this data coming from, who's doing the scenario. However, if we limit to looking at the genesis, what was driving it, and looking into the journey, if it highlights the fact that we need to be able to look at that test data, I would suggest rather than going that level of detail, would looking at a summary. And I'm sure as part of the project, as part of the documents that's been developed, there has been reporting as the first cycle of testing, second cycle of testing, which is normal for these type of development. The summary is always made available. So getting access to those, I think, is a wise choice, but going to the level that we get test documents and we look at test data and we analyze, we got to be in a position to be able to actually evaluate those. I'm not sure how many of us as MPs have been involved in developing. Yes. You seem to be consulting everyone on everything nowadays, so you are a consultant. And so to what extent do we? So to what extent do we actually are able to spend the time to be able to assess those test cases and the test data and the result of those tests is questionable. However, I think it would be a wise choice to look at those documents because I'm sure as part of those documents, the higher level, the result of the test data and the result of the testing cycle will be highlighted. Thank you.
All right. Can we vote on the amendment as put forward by Mr. Sousa?
Yeah.
Great. Sir?
Mr. Jahouri,
Support.
Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Mr. Sousa,
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmerchik,
Yes.
Ms. Atwin,
Yes.
Ms. Kusi,
Against.
Ms. Block,
Against.
Mr. Genuis,
Against.
Madame Vignola,
Contre.
Mr. Backrack.
Against.
5-5.
Sorry. So we're back to, I know, coalition. So we're back to the original amended motion, which has us A of 2010. Proceed with a vote.
All right. Mr. Jahouri,
Support.
Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Mr. Sousa,
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmerchik,
Tak. Sorry, sometimes the Polish escapes. Yes.
Ms. Atwin,
Yes.
Ms. Kusi,
In favor.
Ms. Block,
Yes.
Mr. Genuis,
Yes.
Madame Vignola,
Oui.
Mr. Backrack,
Yes.
11 yeas.
Thank you very much. We are now at Mr. Backrack. If you want to go ahead for your 2.5, we'll try and, Mr. Giroux, if you're fine to stick around for about another 10 minutes.
Looks like we're going to be right up against the bell, Mr. Chair. So I'll do my best to hit it right on the nose here. There's been some discussion at this committee about carbon pricing, and I know this is a matter that's of interest to Canadians right now. I was sitting at the Environment Committee when ECCC was there and estimated, or they reported to the committee that they estimate that the carbon price is responsible for about 30% of the emission reductions in the current federal emissions reduction plan, which I found fairly surprising. The committee has asked for their analysis so they can better understand how they come up with that number. But it does seem like in a lot of this discussion, we're talking about comparing the option of carbon pricing to the option of doing nothing. And I don't think that's an option that very many Canadians will accept. And so the question really in my mind, and because I do think that most Canadians want Canada to act on climate change, to reduce domestic emissions, and to do it as inexpensively as possible. And so the question for you, Mr. Giroux, is whether, in your opinion, there is a less expensive way to achieve the domestic emissions reductions outlined in the emissions reduction plan and in accordance with the national targets. Is there a less expensive way to do that than the current pricing approach?
So it's generally accepted that a carbon